In the previous video, we covered two cases of national identity theft, Greco-Roman Egypt and the Sidonians. In this video, we'll focus on Edom and the Khazars. There are 5 points that we'll cover in this video. How Edom came to be known as Jews, how Edom rose to power over the Yahudim during the Roman era, how Edom spread into Europe and gave birth to the Sephardic Jewish community, the original phenotype of the Sephardic Jews before intermixing with the European population, and finally that of Edom and the Khazars intermixing. The book of Shemuel Bet, 2 Samuel chapter 8, verses 13 to 15. And David made a name for himself when he returned from striking 18,000 Arameans in the Valley of Salt. And he put watch posts in Edom. Throughout all Edom he put watch posts, and all the Edomites became David's servants. And Yahuwah saved David wherever he went, and David reigned over all of Israel, and David was doing right ruling and righteousness to all his people. Strabo, Geography, Book 16, 2:34. As for Judea, its western extremities towards Cassius are occupied by the Idumeans and by the lake. The Idumeans are Nabateans, but owing to sedition they were banished from there, joined the Judeans, and shared in the same customs with them. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 13, Chapter 9, Paragraph 1. Hyrcanus took also Dora and Marissa, cities of Idumea, and subdued all the Idumeans, and permitted them to stay in that country if they would circumcise their genitals and make use of the laws of the Jews. And they were so desirous of living in the country of their forefathers that they submitted to the use of circumcision and of the rest of the Jewish ways of living. At which time, therefore, this befell them, that they were hereafter no other than Jews. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 15, Chapter 7, Paragraph 9. Costobarus was an Idumean by birth, and one of principal dignity among them, and one whose ancestors had been priests to the Kos, whom the Idumeans had formerly esteemed as God. But after Hyrcanus had made a change in their political government, and made them receive the Jewish customs and law, Herod made Costobarus governor of Idumea and Gaza, and gave him his sister Salome to wife. And this was upon the slaughter of his uncle Joseph, who had that government before, as we have related already. When Costobarus had gotten to be so highly advanced, it pleased him and was more than he hoped for, and he was more and more puffed up by his good success. And in a little while he exceeded all bounds, and did not think it fit to obey what Herod, as their ruler, commanded him, or that the Idumeans should make use of the Jewish customs or be subject to them. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 15, Chapter 7, Paragraph 10. But when the king knew the thing, by his sister's information, he sent men to the places where he had the intimation they were concealed, and ordered both them and those that were accused as guilty with them to be killed, insomuch that there were now none at all left of the family of Hyrcanus. And the kingdom was entirely in Herod's own power, and there was nobody remaining of such dignity as could put a stop to what he did against the Jewish laws. The book of Hazon, Revelation, chapter 2, verse 9. I know your works, and pressure, and poverty, yet you are rich. and the blasphemy of those that say that they are Yahudim and are not, but are a congregation of Satan. The book of Hazon, Revelation chapter 3, verse 9. See, I am giving up those of the congregation of Satan who say that they are Yahudim and are not, but lie. See, I am making them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. The book of Malachi, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. The message of the word of Yahuwah to Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, said Yahuwah. But you ask, in what way have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, declares Yahuwah? And I have loved Jacob, but I have hated Esau, and have laid waste his mountains and his inheritance for the jackals of the wilderness. If Edom says, we have been beaten down, let us return and build the ruins, Yahuwah of hosts said, thus, let them build, but I tear down, and they shall be called border of wrongness, and the people against whom Yahuwah is enraged forever. A few key points to remember. The Edomites were conquered by the Yahudim and permitted to stay in the land if they would adopt the laws and culture of the Yahudim. The Edomites were idol worshippers, whose chief god was Koz, Kuaz, or Chaos. Some of his symbols were an eagle, bull, and lightning bolt, similar to that of the Greco-Roman Zeus. Edom is called the congregation of Satan by Yahuwah, so the true identity of the god Koz of the Edomites is that of Satan. Edom pretended to be Yahudim while hating the laws and culture of the Yahudim. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 14, Chapter 1, Paragraph 2. So when he had sent a message to his brother with him about agreeing the matters between them, he laid aside his hostility to him on these conditions: that Aristobulus should be king, that he should live without meddling with public affairs, and quietly enjoy the estate he had acquired. When they had agreed upon these terms in the temple, and had confirmed the agreement with oaths, and the giving of one another their right hands, and embracing one another in the sight of the whole multitude, they departed, the one Aristobulus to the palace, and Hyrcanus as a private man to the former house of Aristobulus. But there was a certain friend of Hyrcanus, an Idum man called Antipater, who was very rich, and in his nature an active and rebellious man, who was at enmity with Aristobulus, and had differences with him on account of his goodwill to Hyrcanus. It is true that Nicholas of Damascus says that Antipater was the stock of principal Jews who came out of Babylon into Judea. But that assertion of his was to gratify Herod, who was his son, and who, by certain revolutions of fortune, came afterward to be king of the Jews, whose history we shall give you in its proper place hereafter. However, this Antipater was at first called Antipas, and that was his father's name also, of whom they relate this, that King Alexander and his wife made him general of all Idumea, and that he made a league of friendship with those Arabians and Gazites and Ashkelonites that were of his own party, and had by many and large presents made them his fast friends. But now this younger Antipater was suspicious of the power of Aristobulus, and was afraid of some mischief he might do to him, because of his hatred to him. So he stirred up the most powerful of the Jews, and talked against him to them privately, and said that it was unjust to overlook the conduct of Aristobulus, who had gotten the government unrighteously, and ejected his brother out of it who was elder, and ought to retain what belonged to him by prerogative of his birth. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 14, Chapter 4, Paragraph 5. Now the occasions of this misery which came upon Jerusalem were Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, by raising a rebellion one against the other, for now we lost our liberty, and became subject to the Romans, and were deprived of that country which we had gained by our arms from the Syrians, and were compelled to restore it to the Syrians. Moreover, the Romans exacted of us in a little time above 10,000 talents, and the royal authority, which was a dignity formerly bestowed on those that were high priests by the right of their family, became the property of private men. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 14, Chapter 8, Paragraph 3. However, when Caesar after some time had finished that war and was sailed away for Syria, he honored Antipater greatly, and confirmed Hyrcanus in the high priesthood, and bestowed on Antipater the privilege of a citizen of Rome, and a freedom from taxes everywhere. And it is reported by many that Hyrcanus went along with Antipater in this expedition, and came himself into Egypt. When Antipater had made this speech, Caesar appointed Hyrcanus to be high priest, and gave Antipater what principality he himself should choose, leaving the determination to himself. So he made him procurator of Judea. He also gave Hyrcanus leave to raise up the walls of his own city, upon his asking that favor of him, for they had been demolished by Pompey. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 14, Chapter 9, Paragraph 3. But now the principal men among the Jews, when they saw Antipater and his sons grow so much in the goodwill the nation bore to them, and in the revenues which they received out of Judea, and out of Hyrcanus' own wealth, they became ill-disposed to him. For indeed, Antipater had contracted a friendship with the Roman emperors, and when he had prevailed with Hyrcanus to send them money, he took it to himself, and purloined the present intended, and sent it off as if it were his own, and not Hyrcanus' gift to them. Hyrcanus heard of this, his management, but took no care about it. Nay, he rather was very glad of it. But the chief men of the Jews were therefore in fear, because they saw that Herod was a violent and bold man, and very desirous of acting tyrannically. So they came to Hyrcanus, and now accused Antipater openly, and said to him, How long will you be quiet under such actions as are now done? Or do you not see that Antipater and his sons have already seized upon the government, and that it is only the name of a king which is given you? But do not suffer these things to be hidden from you, nor think to escape danger by being so careless of yourself and of your kingdom. For Antipater and his sons are not now stewards of your affairs. Do not deceive yourself with such a notion. They are evidently absolute lords. For Herod, Antipater's son, has killed Hezekiah and those that were with him, and has thereby transgressed our law, which has forbidden to slay any man, even though he were a wicked man, unless he had been first condemned to suffer death by the Sanhedrin. Yet has he been so insolent as to do this, and that without any authority from you. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 14, Chapter 13, Paragraph 1. But Antony, by reason of the old hospitable friendship he had made with his father Antipater, at that time when he was with Gabinius, he made both Herod and Phasaelus tetrarchs, and committed the public affairs of the Jews to them, and wrote letters to that purpose. He also bound 15 of their adversaries, and was going to kill them, but Herod obtained their pardon. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 14, Chapter 14, Paragraph 4. This account made Antony grieve for the change that had happened in Herod's condition, and reasoning with himself that this was a common case among those that are placed in such great dignities, and that they are liable to the mutations that come from fortune, he was very ready to give him the assistance he desired, and this because he called to mind the friendship he had had with Antipater, because Herod offered him money to make him king, as he had formerly given it to him to make him tetrarch, and chiefly because of his hatred to Antigonus, for he took him to be a rebellious person and an enemy to the Romans. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 14, Chapter 14, Paragraph 5. This young man, the grandson, Herod afterward took care to have killed, as we shall show you in its proper place. But when the Senate was dissolved, Antony and Caesar went out of the Senate house with Herod between them, and with the consuls and other magistrates before them, in order to offer sacrifices and to lay up their decrees in the Capitol. Antony also feasted Herod the first day of his reign, and thus did this man receive the kingdom, having obtained it on the 184th Olympiad, when Caius Domitius Calvinus was consul the second time, and Caius Asinius Pollio the first time. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 14, Chapter 16, Paragraph 4. This destruction befell the city of Jerusalem when Marcus Agrippa and Caninius Gallus were consuls to Rome on the 185th Olympiad, on the third month, on the solemnity of the fast, as if a periodical revolution of calamities had returned since that which befell the Jews under Pompey. For the Jews were taken by him on the same day, and this was after 27 years' time. So when Sosius had dedicated a crown of gold to God, he marched away from Jerusalem and carried Antigonus with him in bonds to Antony. But Herod was afraid lest Antigonus should be kept in prison only by Antony, and that when he was carried to Rome by him, he might get his cause to be heard by the Senate, and might demonstrate as he was himself of royal blood, and Herod but a private man, that therefore it belonged to his sons, however, to have the kingdom, on account of the family they were of, in which case he had himself offended the Romans by what he had done. Out of Herod's fear of this, it was that he, by giving Antony a great deal of money, tried to persuade him to have Antigonus killed, which if it were once done, he should be free from that fear. And thus did the government of the Asamoneans cease, 126 years after it was first set up. This family was a splendid and illustrious one, both on account of the nobility of their stock and of the dignity of the high priesthood, as also for the glorious actions their ancestors had performed for our nation. But these men lost the government by their dissensions one with another, and it came to Herod, the son of Antipater, who was of no more than a vulgar family, and of no eminent extraction, but on that was subject to other kings. And this is what history tells us was the end of the Asamonean family. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 15, Chapter 2, Paragraph 4. Accordingly, when Hyrcanus came, full of assurance by the permission of the king of Parthia, and at the expense of the Jews, who supplied him with money, Herod received him with all possible respect, and gave him the upper place at public meetings, and set him above all the rest at feast, and thereby deceived him. He called him his father, and tried by all the ways possible that he might have no suspicion of any treacherous design against him. He also did other things, in order to secure his government, which yet occasioned a rebellion in his own family, for being cautious how he made any illustrious person the high priest of God. He sent for an obscure priest out of Babylon whose name was Ananias, and bestowed the high priesthood upon him. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 15, Chapter 3, Paragraph 1. So King Herod immediately took the high priesthood away from Ananias, who, as we said before, was not of this country, but of those Jews that had been carried captive beyond the Euphrates. For there were not a few 10,000s of this people that had been carried captives, and dwelt about Babylonia. Thus Ananias came. He was one of the stock of the high priest, and had been of old a particular friend of Herod. And when he was first made king, he conferred that dignity upon him, and now put him out of it again, in order to quiet the troubles in his family. Though what he did was plainly unlawful, for at no other time of old was any one that had once been in that dignity deprived of it. It was Antiochus Epiphanes who first broke that law, and deprived Jesus, and made his brother Onias high priest in his stead. Aristobulus was the second that did so, and took that dignity from his brother Hyrcanus. And this Herod was the third, who took that high office away from Ananias, and gave it to this young man Aristobulus in his stead. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 15, Chapter 3, Paragraph 3. At first they were only spectators of Herod's servants and acquaintances as they were swimming, but after a while the young man, at the instigation of Herod, went into the water among them, while such of Herod's acquaintance as he had appointed to do it dipped him as he was swimming, and plunged him under water in the dark of the evening, as if it had been done in sport only. Nor did they stop until he was entirely suffocated. And thus was Aristobulus murdered, having lived no more in all than 18 years, and kept the high priesthood 1 year only, which high priesthood Ananias now recovered again. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 15, Chapter 6, Paragraph 1. As for Herod himself, he saw that there was no one of royal dignity left but Hyrcanus, and therefore he thought it would be for his advantage not to suffer him to be an obstacle in his way any longer, for that in case he himself survived and escaped the danger he was in, he thought it the safest way to put it out of the power of such a man to make any attempt against him at such junctures of affairs as was more worthy of the kingdom than himself, and in case he should be killed by Caesar, his envy prompted him to desire to slay him that would otherwise be king after him. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 15, Chapter 6, Paragraph 2. Now as soon as Herod had received this letter, he immediately sent for Hyrcanus, and questioned him about the league he had made with Malchus. And when he had denied it, he showed his letter to the Sanhedrin, and put the man to death immediately. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 15, Chapter 7, Paragraph 10. But when the king knew the thing, by his sister's information, he sent men to the places where he had the intimation they were concealed, and ordered both them and those that were accused as guilty with them to be killed, insomuch that there were now none at all left of the family of Hyrcanus. And the kingdom was entirely in Herod's own power, and there was nobody remaining of such dignity as could put a stop to what he did against the Jewish laws. Josephus, Jewish Antiquities, Book 20, Chapter 1, Paragraph 3. Herod also, the brother of the deceased Agrippa, who was then possessed of the royal authority over Cassius, petitioned Claudius Caesar for the authority over the temple and the money of the sacred treasure, and the choice of high priests, and obtained all that he petitioned for, so that after that time this authority continued among all his descendants until the end of the war. Accordingly, Herod removed the last high priest, called Simtherus, and bestowed that dignity on his successor, Joseph, the son of Cantos. The book of Hazon, Revelation, chapter 2, verse 9. I know your works, and pressure, and poverty, yet you are rich, and the blasphemy of those that say that they are Yahudim and are not, but are a congregation of Satan. The book of Hazon, Revelation, chapter 3, verse 9. See, I am giving up those of the congregation of Satan, who say that they are Yahudim and are not, but lie. See, I'm making them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. The book of Malachi, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. The message of the word of Yahuwah to Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, said Yahuwah, but you ask, in what way have you loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, declares Yahuwah? And I have loved Jacob, but I have hated Esau, and have laid waste his mountains and his inheritance for the jackals of the wilderness. If Edom says, we have been beaten down, let us return and build the ruins, Yahuwah of hosts said, thus, let them build, but I tear down, and they shall be called border of wrongness, and the people against whom Yahuwah is enraged forever. The book of Yohanan, John, chapter 8, verses 39 to 45. They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. Yahusha said to them, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man who has spoken to you the truth which I heard from Elohim. Abraham did not do this. You do the works of your father. Then they said to him, we were not born of whoring. We have one Father, Elohim. Yahusha said to them, if Elohim were your father, you would love me, for I came forth from Elohim, and am here. For I have not come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not know what I say? Because you are unable to hear my word. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you wish to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and has not stood in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks the lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And because I speak the truth, you do not believe me. The book of Corinthian Bet, 2 Corinthians, chapter 11, verses 13 to 15. For such are false emissaries, deceptive workers, masquerading as emissaries of Messiah. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as a messenger of light. It is not surprising, then, if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. How Edom rose to power over the Yahudim. A few key points to remember. The internal conflict between brothers Hyrcanus and Aristobulus allowed the Idumean Antipater to drive a deeper wedge between the two, while positioning himself as an ally of Hyrcanus and the Romans. As the friendship between the Idumeans and the Romans grew, so did their control over the public affairs of the Yahudim through Hyrcanus' carelessness. Through careful positioning, lies, theft, bribery, and murder, the Idumeans obtained rulership over Judea, control of the temple, sacred treasury, and selection of high priest. Nathan Asherbel, Pictorial History of the Jewish People, page 114. Wherever the Romans went, Jews went too. As subjects of the empire, a number were allowed to settle in Gaul. It is possible that there were several small colonies of Jews in France during the first centuries after the end of the Jewish state. There is evidence in the Talmud that the illustrious Rabbi Akiba visited that country sometime before the outbreak of the Bar Kokhba's revolt in 133 CE. It is certain, though, that by the 6th century there were compact little communities of Jews in some 20 towns, most of them in the province, such as Arles, Narbonne, Orleans, Marseilles, and among those in the north, Paris. Josephus, the Jewish War, Book 2, Chapter 7, Paragraph 3. And now Archelaus took possession of his ethnarchy, and used not the Jews only, but the Samaritans also, barbarously, and this was out of his resentment of their old quarrels with him. Whereupon both of them sent ambassadors against him to Caesar. And in the 9th year of his government he was banished to Vienna, a city of Gaul, and his effects were put into Caesar's treasury. Josephus, the Jewish War, Book 2, Chapter 9, Paragraph 6. These arguments prevailed with Herod, so that he came to Caius, by whom he was punished for his ambition by being banished into Spain. For Agrippa followed him in order to accuse him, to whom also Caius gave his tetrarchy, by way of addition. So Herod died in Spain, where his wife had followed him. Based on the available evidence, I believe that the Edomites, along with the Sidonians, formed the nucleus of the Sephardic Jewish communities in Spain, Portugal, and France. The Sephardic Jews controlled much of the slave trade as financiers, insurers, and also as ship and plantation owners. Hugh Thomas, The Slave Trade, page 159. Amsterdam, its capital, with its gabled roofs, its crowded harbor, its 10,000 ships, the property of sophisticated partnerships, and its merchants, sustained by the rich pasturages of the Rhine Delta, was becoming the world's greatest center of finance and insurance. To some extent, this trade was directed by Sephardic Jews, who had found refuge from the Spanish and Portuguese Inquisitions, and who knew very well the size and the nature of the Spanish and Brazilian markets. Great wealth, too, would soon enable the Dutch to establish the only standing army in Europe comparable to that of Spain. Hugh Thomas, The Slave Trade, page 213. Dutch Sephardic Jews played a certain part in this slave traffic from Curaçao. They had excellent contacts with Portuguese New Christians in both the Caribbean and Brazil. Firms directed by conversos in Amsterdam were also concerned. By 1702, the Dutch Sephardic community on Curaçao of perhaps 600 accounted for over a third of the wealth of the island. Curaçao flourished, and perhaps 4,000 slaves were exported from there every year between 1668 and 1674. Yet in 1668, because of difficulties over sales, more than 3,000 slaves had to be held in the island's storage facilities. Zain Zohar, Sephardic and Mizrahi Jewry, page 239. An investigation of early modern Jewish-black relations show how Jews shared the denigrating anti-black attitudes and behavior of their host societies. Whether Catholic or Protestant, how Jews wielded anti-black discourse as a means of positioning themselves as insiders, as whites, and how black slaves constituted an opportunity for Jews to obtain the kind of servile labor forbidden to them from among the members of their Muslim or Christian societies. Zohar, page 240. The attitude of early modern Sephardim towards blacks stemmed from a double heritage. The first was internal, rabbinic and medieval Jewish sources. The second was external, Muslim and Christian sources. From the Hellenistic period onward, Jewish sources partook of the increasingly negative general attitude towards blacks. Zohar, pages 245 to 246. Evidence seems to indicate that the first blacks and mulattoes in Amsterdam belonged to the Portuguese, Jewish elites in the city. For reasons of state, Jewish ownership of slaves in the newly established colonies was, with few exceptions, not curtailed or prohibited. Hence, in Dutch Brazil, Barbados, Suriname, Curacao, Jamaica, and elsewhere, Sephardim increasingly participated in the local subculture of slaveholding. Zohar, page 247. In Dutch Brazil, Sephardic merchants appeared to be the majority purchasers of slaves at auctions of the West India Company. Records from 17th century Barbados show 105 Jewish households owning 565 slaves, while evidence from 18th century Jamaica reveals 312 Jewish households owning 3,073 slaves. In 1744, Curaçaoan Jews owned 310 slaves, and in 1765, 860. In Suriname, Jews must have owned well over 10,000 slaves over the course of the 17th and 18th centuries. It seems that death has been pursuing the Sephardim, as they have been driven out of nearly every country that they have ever lived in. Josephus, The Jewish War, Book 2, Chapter 7, Paragraph 4. I cannot also but think it worthy to be recorded that during Glaphyra, the daughter of Archelaus, king of Cappadocia, who had at first been wife to Alexander, who was the brother of Archelaus, concerning whom we have been discoursing. This Alexander was the son of Herod the king, by whom he was put to death, as we have already related. This Glaphyra was married after his death to Juba, king of Libya, and after his death was returned home and lived as a widow with her father. Then it was that Archelaus the ethnarch saw her and fell so deeply in love with her that he divorced Miriamne, who was then his wife, and married her. Arthur Kessler, The 13th Tribe, page 68. At least this is what the continuation of Joseph's letter seems to imply. After these feats of arms, the invasion of Armenia, King Bulan's fame spread to all countries. The king of Edom, Byzantium, and the king of Ishmaelim, the Muslims, heard the news and sent him envoys with precious gifts and money and learned men to convert him to their beliefs. But the king was wise and sent for a Jew with much knowledge and acumen and put all three together to discuss their doctrines. I apologize, this video is getting too long. I'll have to continue it in another video. Thank you for listening and watching.